pessoas que estão nos assistindo remotamente e aqui conosco hoje. Nosso segundo seminário de hoje, ele vai ser conduzido aqui pelo Dr. Giorgio Bardizza. O Giorgio, ele possui doutorado em Física Aplicada da University of Milano, né? Ele é italiano. Ele trabalhou por muitos e muitos anos, 10 anos, no Joint Research Center for the European Commission, especificamente no European Solar Test Installation, é o ESTI, que a gente chama, né? Lá, sua principal função era projetar e conduzir experimentos para avaliar o desempenho de novos dispositivos fotovoltaicos de filmes finos. E é especificamente sobre isso que ele vai conversar aqui com a gente hoje, sobre a parte mais de medidas de novos dispositivos, especificamente de perovskites, que é um projeto que a gente está começando a trabalhar agora, né? Desde do ano passado, o Giorgio está trabalhando no TUV, né, como gerente global no setor fotovoltaico, e uma de suas principais tarefas é manter os mais altos padrões de qualidade no serviço de teste e inspeção de módulos fotovoltaicos, né? E desde o ano passado também ele é um membro oficial do Comitê Técnico 82 da IEC, trabalhando no Workgroup 2. Então vou passar a palavra agora para o Giorgio. Giorgio, thank you very much for being here with us today.
Thank you to you, Marilia, for this very kind and nice introduction. Good afternoon to all of you. I'm very happy to be here, maybe a bit tired, but I'm certainly happy to be here and to discuss about this topic, which I still feel very, very mine, let's say, topic that I particularly like. I'm Giorgio. I was working before from 2012 up to 2022, so for 10 years at the European Commission. So very interesting that today we have two, let's say, point of views from two very similar institutions. So the European Commission Joint Research Center where I was working is very similar to NREL. So it's a research center of the European Commission. So we say at the service of the policy of the European Commission. And but it's a center where we do research, very similar to NREL for some reasons. And I was working in the unit related to renewable energies, and particularly at the European Solar Test Installation, which is one laboratory accredited for PV devices calibration under the 17025 accreditation scheme. And particularly there, I was involved in all the activity related to emerging PV technologies. So I was not measuring so many PV modules that I'm doing more now. But at that time, I was working with all the small cells to mini modules of new technologies like organic PV, dye-sensitized, and finally also perovskite. At that center, we were not preparing or developing any device, but we were developing the test protocols for this. Okay, so today we will talk about this more than the technology itself. But maybe I don't know how many of you are you familiar with the perovskite? So do you know? I know some of you knows about perovskite, but how many of you knows about perovskite? Everybody, raise the hands. Okay, but at least they know. Okay. Also, just 2 words. So perovskite became very recently, from 2012 approximately. Became very, very interesting because they, in some way, not really replaced, but they came from the same, let's say, community of researchers of organic PV, and but the efficiency of these devices increased impressively over the last 10 years. So now pure perovskite cells reached approximately 26% in efficiency on small scales. So obviously, we're not talking about large PV modules. And recently in the last 5 years, researchers tried to perform tandem structures with silicon or with CIGS. And with the tandem structure, they reach efficiency above 30%, 33%, something like that. So that's obviously attract a lot of interest on this new technology. And so a lot of people moved from organic to perovskite. But now there are other challenges. So efficiency is certainly very interesting, but the question are, first of all, how to measure this, because it's easy to say this cell says 26% in efficiency, but how is reliable this number is completely another topic, and we are more interested in this. And the other topic is about the stability and reliability, so how the numbers can be repeated, reproduced, and how they can be stable over time. So these are very two hot topics at the moment. The efficiency is excellent. The stability, it's improving, but it's not still comparable with standard PV. But the measurements of these devices is particularly difficult because if you try to measure two IVs, one in, we call it direct or forward directions of going from voltage equal to 0 to VOC, and then you perform another IV going from VOC to V equal to 0, you will see two very different IVs, okay? That's very well known. All the people that work with these devices are very well aware of this. They have devices, there are devices which have a large, very large hysteresis. There are others which have a very small one. But anyway, there is. And so the question is, which IV do you want to use? So how to come up with the numbers of power out of these two IVs. Okay, so that's the main topic of my work and of my presentation of today. These are two documents that I have contributed to draft and to write and to publish. One is a technical report of the ISC, where we tried to summarize all the issues related with the measurements of these new technologies, not only perovskite, but also perovskite. And the other instead is a journal paper that I wrote a few years ago about specifically the protocol that we propose to the testing laboratories, and that we believe is let's say, one of the best solution that you can apply when you want to approach this kind of measurements. And so I will describe exactly this. So this is the list of the methods that you will find in the literature. So different laboratories, and REL is applying also some of that. So is applying, I think, the number 4, so the asymptotic Pmax method. All the others are used, so the maximum power point is very, let's say, manual. So you track the Pmax and you measure the Pmax without performing a full IV. The dynamic IV is an IV where at every step you wait for the current to stabilize, but that's an automatic. So in principle, you set a threshold of the stabilization of the current, and then when you reach this threshold, then you move to the next voltage step. The stabilized current at fixed voltage is, let's say, a manual way of controlling the voltage ramp and measuring the current. The asymptotic method is very similar to the dynamic IV, so to the number 2, but you don't wait until really the end of the stabilization. You wait until a certain point, and then you extract the final part in order to save time. That's a method that has been mainly built to save time. And the final one is the method that we have developed at ST, which is not really still my institution, but anyway, I will maybe show you also what I'm doing right now at the end. So this is the first step. So normally we perform an initial very rough IV, or two IVs, one in forward and one in reverse direction, in order to have an approximate idea of VOC, IEC, and particularly VMP, because the idea is to then go around Pmax, but in order to go manually around Pmax, we need to know where it is Pmax. So we have to establish approximately at which voltage we expect the Pmax. And from these two IVs, you can guess a bit and have a first approximation. And then we start manually to first control the voltage and go to close to Pmax. So you can see all the first big step. So first of all, these are the traces of voltage, the green line on both plots. And on the first plot, the blue line is the power, and in the second plot, the red line points, anyway, are the current. And both of these plots are time series, so the x-axis is the time. And you can see that at the beginning, we were moving close to Pmax, and then we kept Pmax, and we control the voltage, and we measure the current for few thousand seconds. So the time scale there is seconds. In this case, about a bit less than 5,000 seconds. And then we wait until we reach, let's say, some sort of stability that we say that's enough for us. And then after that, we start to perform, we call it manual IV, but we start from the Pmax. So the beginning of the IV part, with the green areas, start from the Pmax and goes, first of all, down in voltage, close to V equal to 0, and then jump again at Pmax. I don't know if there is a pointer here, maybe. There is? Okay, yeah. You go down to V equal to 0, then you jump back to Pmax and you keep waiting for another few minutes. And then you continue with the ramp and you perform the other part of the ramp and you go to VOC. And then you jump back again to Pmax and then you wait for a few other minutes. Why we propose to start with this? Because at the end, if you perform an IV starting from Pmax and then building the two other parts of the IV, at the end, you have three parts, this, and this, where you have a good evaluation of the Pmax, okay? And that is obviously the main part where we are interested. And it's also very important because, in my opinion at least, because some of these devices are not very perfectly stable, as we would like at least. But sometimes, okay, when they are really bad, you see it already at the beginning. But when they are okay, you have an estimation, you have a feeling, you have a measure of the stability only after that you have performed the IVs. And in this case, it's good because you have performed already an IV, but you have also some very important data that you can use to confirm or reject your measurements depending on the stability of these three Pmax slots. So you can compare the Pmax measured at the beginning to the Pmax measured here to the Pmax measured there. And then you can say, okay, it's stable enough, we accept the IVs. It's not stable enough, we reject the IVs. How much is enough depends obviously on us, on the reliability that we want to ensure to our client or whatever it is. Okay, that's more or less the same description that I was describing to you right now, and where you can see here the IV and the PV plots divided in the different parts. So in principle, the blue one is the first part that we acquired. Then we acquired this red, the B. You see A, B, so that part. And then this is the yellow, the gray is the second Pmax evaluation, which is overlapping in this case to the blue. And this is instead the third, the D step, is the third, part, where we complete the IVs. And then there is another blue, which is dark blue in this case, which is again overlapping in this particular case because this device was well stable. And so here you can see a practical case where we have built at the end an IV, but we have also three evaluation of the Pmax. And finally, you can put all the data together and we can take you can see overlap the fast IVs below. You can see the manual IV in green dots, and you can see the Pmax evaluation, which has been extracted from one of the three Pmax steps. At the end, in this specific case, the three steps were perfectly agreeing, or the stability was very good, so we didn't have problem. So this is one of that Pmax, which has been, it was the average of one of these steps. And in this case, you see the Pmax value extracted from this overlap with all the IVs that has been measured. Why we believe this approach is interesting? Because if, like in this case too, if the device is not yet well or perfectly stabilized, you can notice it already in the final results. For example, this is the final results of another device which get worse under the illumination. And you can see here, so this is the first step where we evaluate the Pmax. The gray is the second step where we evaluate the Pmax, and the dark This is the gray, the light blue is the first step, the gray is the second, and the blue, dark blue is the third. You can see that there is a clear trend in Pmax, so the Pmax decreases every time. And so you can say, okay, we managed to perform at the end NAVs, but we believe that this instability is not acceptable for us, for example, for our laboratory. So in that case, for example, we rejected these results for an official certificates of this device. This is the case 3, where the device in some cases has been observed to improve over time. And you can see in this case, this is the first evaluation of Pmax. These gray dots are the second evaluation, and the dark blue is the third evaluation. And you can see that the Pmax kept increasing during our AV measurements. Okay, so that's another case that can happen in your measurements. And if you perform this kind of, you apply this kind of method, you can get all this information while you are already performing an IV, and maybe you can already use it. In this case, what we would do is to continue the stabilization and repeat the same process with the aim of finding at the end a good match once the device has been fully stabilized. Okay, that's some statistical data. I don't think I will go in that. If you are interested, I can send you the slides. We have performed, in that case, we were presenting this kind of approach applied to more devices. So I wanted to present, in this case, some statistics about which step times and number of steps we were. Anyway, that's a bit out of the topic of the presentation. I wanted to show you here instead. So now I am not anymore at the JRC, but I am at TÜV Rheinland, as Maria said at the beginning, which is another testing. In this case, it's not an institution, but it's a company. So we perform a certification of testing of everything in principle, and I am involved in the PV group, solar group. And I don't do only new technologies, as you will see next week, because I will present some other data, but I am still involved in this Perovskite-based PV devices calibration topic, because I still like it. And what the approach that we are following here is a bit different, because our role there is to serve typically clients which do not have like months to perform a measurement. So normally they said, okay, we send you, first of all, typically they send us modules and not cells. And secondly, they cannot allow us to measure for months. So we have to be a bit more strict in time, and we have to find solution that can be acceptable for our clients. So we try to find a good compromise between being accurate, fast, and reliable. And we have arrived to these, let's say, results, proposing two different procedures. So we have developed a more, let's say, fast procedure, which allowed for a Pmax uncertainty, which is maybe large compared at least to the one I was used in my previous laboratory. But for some clients which are dealing with large perovskite modules, that's absolutely acceptable. So if they want to have a first measurements done externally, but by another reference testing laboratory of their module, they don't want to say we don't want to say we are the best, this is the record, but we want to have an approximate number of our power or of our efficiency. This kind of uncertainty can be acceptable for these clients. And so we develop a procedure which it's a bit simplified, and in principle is similar. Okay, apart from this preconditioning, which is very similar to the one I was showing to you before, spectral responsivity in this case is not performed because it's too complex for this device, for this fast procedure. And for the IV measurements, we propose to apply the dynamic IV, so not the one I show you, but it's very similar, but instead of starting at Pmax, we start at V equal to 0 and we perform a dynamic IV going in one direction. But we focus here on selecting a good threshold of the stabilization of the current in order at the end to hopefully be sure that the device has stabilized enough. We propose anyway to perform a tracking of Pmax in order to have also another Pmax evaluation, and temperature correction only in some cases. So if you cannot stay below 28, 29 degrees, then you need to have a temperature correction. But in order to have a temperature correction, you need to calculate the temperature coefficient. So again, that's complicate a lot your procedure. And we develop these focus on the final Pmax uncertainty that we have evaluated, and making all these steps, we managed to promise to our client an uncertainty of 3.5% in this case. If the client is not accepting this, we propose a more accurate procedure where mainly we perform the spectral responsivity and the correction of the mismatch factor. We perform two dynamic IV, one in one direction, one in the other one. We perform a tracking of Pmax. We perform temperature corrections, which we perform a more complex and long procedure in order at the end to reach a much more acceptable or much better uncertainty. I think, yeah, that's more or less are the typical IV data. Again, the traces of the voltage and current. And here are two IVs that we perform, dynamic IV that we perform in the two directions. Obviously, these are already elaborated data, so here you don't see all the steps. Okay, I don't know. I think I will stop here, and I would like instead to reply to your questions. If you have it.